Episode 1: The Knock Inside the Wall. When I came back to my childhood home, the silence felt wrong. Not peaceful, expectant. The air carried that damp, heavy smell of something buried too long. The wallpaper peeled like old skin, and every floorboard seemed to sigh when I stepped on it. My mother used to hum while cleaning this house. Now, all that remained was dust and the echo of her absence. I told myself I'd renovate, sell the place, and move on. But on the second night, while scraping plaster off the living room wall, I heard it, a knock. At first, I thought it was a trick of the old pipes, so I tapped back. One soft knock, just to humor myself. Then, clear as breath, something inside the wall answered. I froze, the chisel trembling in my hand. 3 knocks this time. Slow, rhythmic, like someone trying to remember how to be human. I called out, "Hello!" Only the wind replied, slipping through the cracks. But later that night, as I tried to sleep, it came again. Closer now, almost beneath my bed. Knock, knock, knock. Always 3. Always waiting for me to answer. By morning, I convinced myself it was just the house settling. Until I found the dust. A fine white powder scattered beneath the wall where I'd been working. I brushed it aside, and realized it wasn't plaster. It was bone dust. A small draft blew from the crack I'd made. And if I leaned close enough, I could swear I heard breathing. Not from outside, not from above, but inside the wall. I told my neighbor, old Mrs. Glenn, about the noise. She looked at me like I'd said too much. Then she whispered, "It started again, didn't it?" "What started?" I asked. She just shook her head and said, "You shouldn't have woken it." That night, I recorded the sound on my phone. The knocks came in sets of 3, each one a little louder than before. But when I played the recording back, I didn't just hear the knocking. There was a voice underneath it, faint, like breath against a microphone, and it said my name. Not Thomas, but Tommy. No one's called me that since my mother died. I tore open another piece of the wall, desperate to prove there was a logical reason. Rats, water, anything. But what I found behind the plaster wasn't logic. It was something wrapped in a sheet of burlap, dry and stiff, like it had been there for decades. The smell hit me first, sweet and rotten, like a memory that shouldn't be remembered. And beneath the cloth I saw it. A human hand, or what was left of one, curled toward me like it was reaching for help. I stumbled back, knocking over my tools. My phone kept recording, catching every frantic breath, every crack of falling plaster. And under all of it, the same voice whispered again. Calm, cold, almost grateful. "You found me, Tommy." Episode 2: The Hidden Chamber. The day after I found the hand, I swore I'd call the police. But I didn't, because by morning the wall looked repaired. The hole I'd carved open, the one that revealed the burlap and bone, was gone. Smooth plaster, as if it had never been touched. Only the faintest stain remained, like a bruise on the house's skin. I stood there with my tools in hand, trembling. The rational part of me screamed, "You imagined it, Thomas." But the dust on the floor was real, and my phone still held the recording. When I hit play, the knocking came again, 3 times. Then the voice, "You found me, Tommy." I threw the phone across the room. That afternoon, I went into the attic looking for answers. Old plans, letters, anything that could tell me what this house was hiding. The air up there was thick with heat and history. I found boxes of broken toys, newspaper clippings yellowed to the color of nicotine, and finally, a photograph. It showed my mother standing beside a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, and smiling. His hand rested on a child's shoulder. My shoulder. But on the back of the photo, written in her looping handwriting, were 3 words: "Don't open walls." By sunset, curiosity had already drowned out fear. I returned to the living room with a hammer and a flashlight. Every swing into the plaster sent echoes crawling through the house, like something shifting just beyond the reach of light. When the last slab fell, it revealed a hollow space about the size of a small closet, lined with wooden beams and the smell of something long dead. My flashlight beam landed on the burlap again, now fully visible. I pulled at the fabric. It tore apart like old paper, and a cloud of dry decay filled my lungs. There it was, the skeleton, folded into itself, skull tilted down as if praying. A rusted chain hung around its neck, holding a small silver pendant. I knew that pendant. It was my mother's necklace. I wanted to scream, but the air in the room felt thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I saw something behind the bones. A second shape, smaller. I leaned closer, trembling, and realized it wasn't another skeleton, just the faint outline of child-sized handprints pressed into the wooden beam. Then came the whisper again, not from the phone this time, but from inside the chamber itself. He said it was an accident. The light flickered again, and for a split second, I thought I saw the skull turn toward me. The empty sockets seemed to know me. That's when I ran. Out of the room, out of the house, gasping in the cold evening air. But even outside, I could still hear the faint sound behind me. Not knocking this time, digging. Something inside my walls was moving again. Episode 3, The Voice That Knows My Name. I left the house that night and checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind of place where the wallpaper curls like burnt skin and the air smells faintly of mold and loneliness. I told myself I needed one night away to think, to breathe without hearing the sound of plaster cracking or the dry shuffle of bones. But even there, in that dim yellow room, the voice followed me. At first, it came through the pipes, a faint whisper under the sound of running water. Then it began bleeding through the static of the motel TV, through the hum of the refrigerator. Always the same word, Tommy, not shouted, not angry, gentle, like a memory trying to be remembered. I turned off every sound in the room, but the silence only made it worse. I could hear the rhythm again. Knock, knock, knock. It was coming from the wall behind the bed. I pressed my ear to it, nothing. But when I pulled back, a voice, almost inside my skull, whispered, "You left me there." I barely slept that night. My dreams were full of cold hands reaching through plaster, of my mother's face smeared with dust, whispering apologies I couldn't understand. By morning, I decided I needed help. I went to see Mrs. Glenn again, the neighbor who'd warned me not to wake it. She was sitting on her porch, wrapped in a shawl, eyes distant like she'd been waiting for me. Before I said a word, she murmured, "It knows you're listening now." I froze. "What is it, Mrs. Glenn?" Her hands trembled around her cup of tea. "Your father tried to seal it away. We all heard it back then. The knocking, the crying." She swallowed hard. "But your mother couldn't bear it. She stayed in that house long after she should have left." I asked, "Who was the man in that old photo with her?" Her eyes filled with something between fear and pity. "That wasn't your father, Tommy. That was the one they buried." The words hit like ice. I wanted to deny it, but my mother's necklace around that skeleton's neck said otherwise. I returned to the motel that evening, shaking, replaying the voice in my head. When I opened the door, the TV was already on, even though I'd unplugged it. Static hissed across the screen. The snow of it seemed to pulse, like breathing. And then, faintly, the pixels began to form a shape. A face, hollow eyes, teeth showing. The voice came through again. Clear, desperate, close. "Tommy, why did you bury me?" The power went out. The room fell into black silence. And in that silence, I finally understood something I'd been avoiding since I first heard that knock. It didn't just know my name. It remembered the way my voice sounded when I lied. Episode 4, The Photo in the Attic. I didn't go back to the house because I wanted to. I went back because I couldn't stay away. It was as if the air outside had lost its weight, its pull. Every breath I took away from those walls felt thinner, emptier, like the house itself was the only thing keeping me alive. The front door creaked open before I touched it. The smell hit first. Old wood, mold, and something faintly sweet, like rot pretending to be perfume. I stepped inside. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Even the floorboards seemed to hold their breath. I climbed to the attic, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam cut through the dust like a knife through smoke. Boxes stacked in uneven piles. My father's tools. My mother's old coat, hanging by a single thread. And then, on the far wall, I saw it, a frame face down. When I turned it over, the glass had cracked in the center, splintering across a black and white photograph. It was the same picture I found before, my mother, the tall man, and me. Only this time it was whole. And now I understood why it had been torn in half. Because standing beside my mother was another boy. Same haircut, same smile, same clothes. Everything was identical except for one detail. He wasn't me. He was smaller, his eyes darker, his smile tighter, as if forced. And in his hand he held a toy hammer, the same one I used to have when I was little. On the back of the photo, written in shaky ink, were 5 words. "He knows what you did." My stomach twisted. I dropped the photo, and it landed face up, reflecting the beam of my flashlight. For a heartbeat, I thought the boy's eyes moved. A soft creak echoed from the corner. The attic door had closed. "Tommy," the voice came from behind the boxes. I froze. My throat tightened, my flashlight trembling. It came again, closer this time, almost tender. "You took my place." I ran. Down the stairs, through the dust, into the living room. But as I passed the wall, the one I'd broken open, it wasn't smooth anymore. The plaster had cracked again, splitting like dry lips. And from the gap, something thin slid out. A strip of paper. I pulled it free. It was a torn police report. Most of it unreadable except for one line. "Missing child, Thomas Gray, age 6. But I wasn't 6 when my brother disappeared. I was 5. And my name wasn't supposed to be Thomas Gray. It was his." The flashlight flickered, and for an instant, the wall seemed to pulse, like something behind it was breathing in sync with my heart. Then the voice whispered again, soft and cold, just at my ear. "You're living the life I should have had." The flashlight died. Darkness swallowed me whole. And in that darkness, the walls began to knock again. 3 times. Always 3. Episode 5, the police report that never existed. I drove straight to the police station the next morning, the photo and the torn report folded inside my jacket pocket. The road was empty, but the sky hung low, heavy with that gray, bruised light before rain. Inside, the station smelled of coffee, dust, and old paper. The officer at the front desk looked like he'd been bored for 20 years. "I need to see a missing person file," I said. "From 1989. A boy named Thomas Gray." He typed something lazily into his computer, eyes barely lifting. Then his face changed. The tapping stopped. "Sorry," he said, too quickly. "No record of that name." I leaned forward. "There has to be. I have the report. Right here." He frowned, motioning me closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, if you've got one of those old urban legends stuck in your head." I slammed the paper on the counter. "It's not a legend. Look at it." He unfolded it carefully. The ink had faded, the corners frayed, but the stamp, County Police, July 1989, was still there. He went pale. His fingers trembled slightly as he scanned it again. Then he muttered, "Wait here." Minutes passed. 5, 10. Finally, another man appeared, older, uniform crisp, the kind of authority that didn't need a badge. His nameplate read Chief M. Walker. He gave me a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Gray, I'm afraid we have no such file. It must be a forgery." "It's my name on that report," I snapped. "I didn't forge it. I found it inside my wall." The smile didn't fade. "Walls don't keep police reports, son." "Mine does," I whispered. "And bones." His jaw tightened. For a second, his calm cracked. Then, quietly, he said, "You should stop digging into things your parents already buried." Before I could reply, he folded the paper neatly and slid it across the counter. "Back to me." His tone softened, almost sympathetic. "Go home, Mr. Gray. Some histories aren't meant to be recovered." Outside, the rain finally broke, hammering against the roof of my car. I sat there, gripping the paper, watching the ink bleed until the words turned to ghosts. When I got back to the house, something was different. The front door was unlocked. The lights were on. I stepped inside, every instinct screaming to run. But there, on the dining table, was a manila envelope. No name, no address, just a faint watermark, County Police Archive. Inside was a single photograph. My mother, my father, and me, standing in front of the house. But in the background, faint and out of focus, was another figure. A man in a police uniform, Chief Walker. You could see it clearly if you looked close enough. His hand on a shovel, his boots covered in wet cement. A note was paper-clipped to the photo. 5 words, written in red ink. He helped them hide me. I looked toward the wall, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the rain. And then, soft, deliberate, unmistakable, 3 knocks echoed from inside. This time, they weren't asking to be found. They were inviting me in. Episode 6, The Diary Beneath the Floorboards. I didn't sleep that night. The envelope, the photo, the red ink note. They lay on my desk like a heartbeat I could hear but not see. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. It fell in waves, hissing against the windows, seeping through the cracks like the house itself was sweating. By morning, I'd made up my mind. If the walls could hide bones and police reports, what else could they be keeping? My mother's old room was still intact. The lace curtains yellowed. The vanity mirror cracked across her reflection. The air smelled faintly of lavender and mildew, the way it used to when she tucked me in at night. Something in that room felt alive, listening. As I stepped across the creaking floorboards, one plank gave a hollow sound beneath my shoe. I froze. Then I knelt, pried it open, and found a small wooden box wedged between the beams. Inside, a faded leather-bound diary, its spine nearly falling apart. My mother's handwriting covered the first page. June 17, 1989. The house won't let me forget. Her words clawed at me as I read. He says we can't tell anyone, that it was an accident. But I hear him crying through the walls. Every night. Tommy, he calls. Tommy, please. The next entries were shorter, shakier. The sound stopped for 3 days. I thought it was over. But then I saw his hand in the plaster. Your father said it's just settling. But plaster doesn't move. Does it? God forgive us. I flipped ahead. The last entry was dated July 3, 1989. The same day stamped on the missing person report. I sealed the last crack tonight. He's quiet now. I told the other Tommy it was just a bad dream. But when he looks at me, I think he knows. The room tilted. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the book. The other Tommy. The voice that called my name from the walls wasn't some ghost of a stranger. It was him, the first me, the boy they buried. A faint sound broke through the silence. Tap, tap, tap. I turned my head toward the corner where the floor met the wall. The noise was coming from underneath the planks I just opened. Slow, patient, like knuckles brushing wood. I leaned closer, and a single word hissed through the crack. Trade. The lights flickered. My reflection in the mirror behind me smiled. But I didn't. The floor shuddered. Dust poured from the ceiling. And in the reflection, the figure that looked like me whispered again. Mouth moving out of sync, eyes hollow, voice splitting into 2 tones. You had your turn. Then came the knocking. Not just one wall this time. All of them. As if the house itself had decided it was done keeping secrets. Episode 7, The Night the Walls Bled. I used to think houses died quietly, slowly rotting, fading into dust. But that night, mine screamed. I stood in my mother's room, her diary still open on the floor, the word trade echoing in my skull. The air was thick, almost syrupy, like breathing through someone else's lungs. The knocking hadn't stopped. It had spread. Up the stairs, across the ceiling, beneath my feet. I grabbed the hammer, the same one I'd used to break open the wall. This time, I wasn't going to uncover anything. I was going to destroy it. The first swing cracked the plaster cleanly. The second sent dust exploding across the room. By the third, I saw it. Something wet glistening in the fissure. I leaned closer. It wasn't water. It was red. The wall was bleeding. A thin stream ran down to the floorboards, soaking the edges of the diary, turning the paper pink. The smell hit next, copper and decay, like the scent that clings to your hands after touching raw meat. I stumbled back, gagging, watching as more crimson seeped through the cracks. The paint began to bubble, pulse almost like skin. From behind the wall, a muffled sob escaped. A child's. "It hurts, Tommy." I swung again, screaming, tearing the plaster apart until chunks of it hit the floor. But with every strike, the walls pulsed harder, breathing, alive. Blood ran freely now, dripping from the ceiling, streaking the wallpaper in slow, deliberate veins. And then the house spoke, not through the pipes, not through whispers, through the structure itself. The beams groaning, the nails screaming, the floor shuddering beneath my feet. "You took what wasn't yours." I backed into the hallway, hammer slick with red. Every wall I passed trembled. Handprints, small, childlike, appeared in fresh blood across the surface, smearing as if pressed from the other side. I ran to the living room where I'd first found the bones. The plaster there had already split open. A dark hole yawned before me, breathing, exhaling that same sweet rot that had haunted every corner of this house. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification, though I hadn't had service in days. The screen flickered, and a text appeared from an unknown number. "You're almost home." The floor beneath me rippled. Blood began seeping between the boards. And then I heard two voices, mine and another, speaking in perfect unison, from inside the walls. "You can't kill what you already are." The house shuddered violently, and for a moment, I saw it. The outline of a face pushing through the plaster beside me, lips moving soundlessly, eyes bleeding dust. I dropped the hammer. The knocking stopped. Everything went still. And then, from the corner of the room, the smallest sound broke the silence. A child's giggle. Light flickered once, twice, and for a brief heartbeat before the darkness swallowed me whole. I saw something written across the wall in blood. "Welcome back, Tommy." Episode 8, The Neighbor's Confession. By dawn, the bleeding had stopped, but the stains were still there, dark, crusted veins running down the walls like the house had tried to heal itself and failed. I left before the sun fully rose, still shaking, the hammer marks on my hands now crusted with something that wasn't all mine. I needed answers, and there was only one person left who might have them. Mrs. Glenn. Her porch creaked as I approached. The curtains were drawn, the air around her house heavy with the scent of damp earth and wilted flowers. When she opened the door, she looked older than she had a day ago, smaller, like the night itself had taken something from her. "You shouldn't have gone back in there," she whispered. I didn't bother pretending I didn't understand. "You knew, didn't you?" I said. "About the boy, about me." Her lips trembled, but she didn't deny it. "We all did. The whole street heard it that night. The hammering, the crying." She motioned for me to come in. The living room smelled of mothballs and fear. Photographs lined the mantel, smiling families, frozen decades before. But one photo was turned face down. "Who was he?" I asked. "The one in the wall." Her eyes darted toward the fireplace. "Your brother." I waited for her to say half-brother or neighbor's son, something that would make it easier to breathe. But she didn't. "Your parents told everyone he'd gone to live with an aunt in Illinois. But the truth was uglier. They couldn't handle what happened." I felt the room tilt. "What happened?" She leaned closer, her voice cracking like dry wood. "You pushed him, Tommy, into the wall." My stomach dropped. "That's not true. You were playing by the basement stairs. He fell. Your father panicked. Your mother was broken. They said it was an accident at first, but then the police came asking questions. So your father..." She stopped, pressing a trembling hand over her mouth. I finished for her. "He buried him. In the wall." Her eyes filled with tears. "Your mother couldn't stand the sound of him crying at night, so she prayed. She begged the house to take him away. And it did." The clock ticked once, then again. Each sound felt louder than the last. I stood, heart pounding, the edges of my vision swimming red. Why didn't anyone stop them? Mrs. Glenn looked at me, her voice dropping to a whisper that wasn't entirely hers. Because we saw what happened to the last person who tried. She reached for the photo on the mantel and turned it over. A man stared back. Familiar uniform, hard eyes. Chief Walker. His face was younger, but unmistakable. And in the background of that photo, behind the row of smiling neighbors, I saw my house, and what looked like a child's hand pressed against the inside of the upstairs window. I felt cold all over. Mrs. Glenn's hands were shaking now. He's angry, Tommy. He's been angry for a long time. The house feeds on guilt, and you're the only one left to feed it. Before I could reply, something banged against her wall. Once, twice, the third time. She froze, eyes wide. Do you hear it? I whispered. She nodded slowly. It's never come this far before. And then, from inside her own walls, a small voice whispered, soft and wet with dust. You shouldn't have told him. The next moment, the floor beneath her split. The sound was like 1,000 bones breaking at once. And Mrs. Glenn was gone. Episode 9, The Skeleton Moves. I don't remember running home. Only the sound of my heartbeat and the rain swallowing the screams. Mrs. Glenn's house had folded into silence behind me. Her door still open, the air still trembling with the echo of that voice. I told myself I'd call for help, but there was no one left to help. Not anymore. When I reached my porch, the front door was already open. The wind pushed it back and forth, creaking softly, as if the house had been waiting, breathing in rhythm with me. The smell hit me first. Metal, damp, and underneath it something like turned soil. I stepped inside. The living room was darker than it should have been. My flashlight refused to stay on. Every time I tried, the beam flickered and died, leaving only the red glow of the digital clock on the wall. 3:03 a.m. The same time the knocking had started the first night. The wall that once held the skeleton was cracked wide open now. The burlap was gone. So was the body. But in its place, footprints. Small, wet, and bare. They led from the hole in the wall across the living room floor and out toward the front hallway. Each step left behind a faint, pinkish print, still glistening. I followed them, slowly. The trail went up the stairs. Halfway up, I stopped. One of the prints was smaller than the rest, like a child's. Beside it, another set appeared. Larger, heavier, as if someone or something was walking with him. At the top of the stairs, the prints turned toward my bedroom. The door was ajar, the hinges whining as it moved on its own. Inside, my bed was neatly made, except for one thing. On the pillow lay the silver pendant that had hung around the skeleton's neck. My mother's necklace. Clean, polished, and still warm. I heard movement behind me, a soft shuffle, the faint rasp of bone against wood. When I turned, the hallway was empty, but the air wasn't still, pulsed, like breath against my skin. Tommy? The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. You took my life. I backed toward the stairs. You're not real, I whispered. You're not. A sound cut me off. Creak. I looked down. At the bottom of the staircase stood the skeleton, no longer a pile of bones, but something caught between form and memory. Flesh hung in ribbons over bone. Its jaw moved, but the words came out from the walls around it. Give it back. I stumbled backward, my heel catching the top step. The flashlight hit the floor and spun, its beam slicing across the hallway. For a second, it caught the figure's face, half skull, half reflection of me. Then the light went out. I don't remember falling, but when I opened my eyes, I was lying at the bottom of the stairs. My shoulders screamed with pain. The air was colder now, stiller. And on the wall beside me, drawn in something dark and wet, was a single word. Return. I crawled to my feet, trembling, breath ragged. The footprints were gone, but the sound of them hadn't stopped. Somewhere above me, something was walking, slowly, deliberately, back and forth. Not inside the rooms, inside the walls. Episode 10, The Mirror That Remembers. The morning light didn't feel like morning. It crawled through the curtains like smoke, weak and colorless, touching nothing it couldn't turn gray. I hadn't slept. Every sound the house made felt like breathing, its timbers stretching, exhaling. The footsteps above me had stopped around dawn, but the silence they left behind was worse. It was the kind of quiet that listens. When I finally stood, my body felt heavy, as if something unseen had wrapped itself around me in the night. Every muscle ached from exhaustion, from fear, from remembering. I went to the bathroom to wash the dried blood from my hands, but the water came out brown, and when I looked up, the mirror was fogged, though the air was cold. My reflection should have been there. It wasn't. Only the faint outline of a handprint pressed against the inside of the glass. I leaned closer. My breath ghosted over the surface. The fog cleared, and then it appeared. Me, but not me. The reflection was smiling. I wasn't. Its skin was a shade paler, its eyes too still. And behind it, in the glass, the hallway stretched further than it should have, as if the mirror remembered the house the way it used to be. "You took what was mine," it whispered. The voice didn't come from the air. It came from behind the glass, soft and close, like breath against my ear. I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, you're not real." But the reflection didn't move with me. It stayed where it was, head tilted, eyes dark with something between grief and hunger. "Mother said you were the quiet one," it murmured. "The gentle one. But you screamed the loudest when the wall closed, didn't you?" My legs went weak. I gripped the sink to stay upright. "I didn't do this," I choked out. "It was him. Father, he." The reflection smiled wider, showing teeth that were too white. "He only finished what you started." The lights flickered, and for an instant, I saw it. My reflection standing outside the mirror, behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. When I looked back, the glass was empty again. No fog, no smile, no me. Just my mother's silver pendant lying on the counter. I didn't remember bringing it upstairs. I reached for it, but the metal burned my fingers, leaving a thin red mark in the shape of the chain. And from deep inside the walls came that low, rhythmic knocking, steady, deliberate, patient. "Knock, knock, knock." Then a voice, smaller, broken. "Let me out, Tommy. I can wear your skin better." The bathroom lights exploded, glass raining down like hail. I stumbled out into the hallway, clutching my hand, heart pounding. In the cracked mirror behind me, the reflection moved one last time, smiling faintly, almost tenderly, before whispering, "Next time you blink, I'll be the one looking out." And then the mirror shattered completely. Episode 11, The Basement Tape. I didn't plan to go into the basement again. After what I saw in the mirror, after the blood, after the voice, I swore I'd never step foot beneath that house. But the knocking changed. It wasn't random anymore. It was rhythmic, steady, like a message. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 again. Repeating over and over until the sound burrowed into my skull. And then the smell started. Damp, metallic, familiar, like old videotape left to rot in the dark. So I went down. The basement air was colder than it should have been. The bulb above the stairs flickered as if it were breathing too. Every step I took down creaked like a warning, but the sound beneath, the tapping, the faint shuffle, drew me forward. Halfway down, I saw it. A corner of plastic sticking out from behind the old boiler, wrapped in dust and cobwebs. A VHS tape. The label was smeared, the ink bled through from years of moisture. But I could still make out the words, barely legible in my mother's handwriting. Home, July 1989. My hands shook as I held it. The plastic was damp, sticky, almost warm. I didn't even think, just ran back upstairs, found an old VCR in a box of junk, and plugged it into the television. The tape hissed before the image appeared. Static, then color. A living room. Ours. My mother sat on the couch, pale and smiling too wide. My father stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, eyes hollow and fixed on the camera. Between them, 2 boys played on the floor. Both of them looked like me. The screen wavered, flickering as if the film itself didn't want to remember. Then came the sound of a hammer. A thud. A scream, high, childlike, cut short too fast. The camera shook. My mother's voice whispered, trembling, "Stop recording. Please, stop." But my father didn't. He turned the camera toward the stairs, toward the basement door. The picture went dark. Only sound remained. Footsteps, crying, and that same muffled knocking. Then, faintly, a voice, my father's. "If anyone asks," he ran away. The video cut to static. But through the hiss, another voice bled in, soft and wet, like someone whispering directly into the speaker. "You shouldn't have watched that, Tommy." I froze. The TV was still on, but the static shifted. Shapes began to form inside the noise, outlines of hands pressing against the screen from the inside. Then a face. His face. My twin. Blood smeared across the inside of the glass. His mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Trade places," he whispered. "You had your turn." The TV exploded in a flash of light and smoke. I fell backward, clutching my ears, heart slamming against my ribs. The air filled with the smell of burning plastic and dust. And in the silence that followed, I heard it again. Faint, from the basement below. The sound of footsteps climbing the stairs. Slow, careful, patient. He was coming home. Episode 12, The Skeleton Speaks. He was in the house again. I could feel it. The air had changed. Thicker now, humming faintly, like the house was holding its breath for him. Every step I took made the floor shiver, and the shadows moved just a second too late, as if they were remembering where they were supposed to be. The television still smoked, a faint curl rising from the ruined screen. The smell of melted plastic mingled with something else. Earth, rot, and a sweetness that didn't belong in this world. Then I heard it. The slow, uneven rhythm of bones brushing wood. Step, drag, step, drag. Coming from the hallway, I turned, and there he was. Not quite a skeleton anymore. Not quite human either. A figure pieced together from what the house could find. Bone, dust, and something darker holding it all in place. His skull tilted as if listening to the walls breathe. His eye sockets glowed faintly red, pulsing like embers trying to remember what fire felt like. "Tommy!" The voice came from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the air. "You took my name. You took my mother." I backed away, but he followed, dragging one foot, each movement leaving streaks of gray ash behind him. "I didn't mean to," I said. My voice cracked like the walls around us. "It was an accident." He tilted his head, that almost human motion that made my skin crawl. "Accidents don't last forever. But you made yours permanent." He stepped closer. I could hear his bones grinding like teeth. "She heard me cry, Tommy. She prayed for it to stop. So they built me into the wall. And every night I called for you." The room felt smaller now. The ceiling sagged like it was listening. "I was 5, I whispered. "I didn't know." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. "Then why do I remember your hands pushing me?" My breath caught. "No, that's not." The lights flickered. The walls moaned, stretching inward. He raised a hand, skeletal, fingers blackened with dried earth, and pointed to the ceiling. "She said we could share, Tommy. That I could come back if you ever found me." The pendant around my neck, the one I'd picked up without realizing, burned against my chest. I ripped it off and threw it across the room. It hit the floor and burst open. Inside was a small lock of hair. Child's hair. He smiled, what was left of his jaw clicking into place. Mother kept me close. I stumbled backward. "What do you want from me?" He took another step, then another. The walls behind him began to pulse like veins, red light leaking through the cracks. "You've had my life long enough. It's time I took it back." He lunged. His hands were cold and dry as bone dust, gripping my face, pressing it toward the wall. The plaster rippled beneath my skin, soft, wet, pulling me in like clay swallowing air. I screamed. Then I heard her voice. My mother's. Clear, sharp, cutting through the chaos. "Stop! The skeleton froze. The walls shuddered, groaning as if they too recognized her. For the briefest moment, the house went still, waiting for her next word. But there was only silence. When I opened my eyes, the skeleton was gone. So was the pendant. Only the whisper remained, brushing the back of my neck like a promise. She can't save you anymore, Tommy. The house already has. Episode 13, The Return of the Hammer. When I woke, it was still night. The kind of night that feels heavier than sleep. Thick, airless, watchful. The house was silent again, pretending. It always did that after something happened, as if holding its breath to see whether I'd believe it had gone still. I lay on the floor for a while, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. They looked like veins now, spreading wider every time I blinked. And in that silence, something new appeared. A metallic clink from upstairs. Slow, repetitive, familiar. I followed it. The noise led me to my parents' old bedroom. The door creaked open on its own, revealing the faintest glow leaking from the wardrobe. The smell of rust and damp would hit me, thick enough to taste. The hammer was there, the same one my father had used the night everything ended. It stood upright on the floor, buried halfway into the wood, like someone had swung it down with inhuman force. Dried blood crusted the handle, black and flaking. The initials carved into its grip, JG, confirmed what I already knew. I crouched beside it, trembling. When I reached for the handle, the wood was warm, and then I heard his voice. Not the skeleton's, not my brother's, my father's. You weren't supposed to dig, son. I froze. His tone wasn't angry, just tired, heavy, like regret stretched too thin. Dad. My voice cracked in the darkness. You're dead. Not to this house, he said. It remembers everything we built into it. The hammer shifted slightly, vibrating against the floorboards. The walls groaned in reply, their cracks widening until faint trails of dust drifted down like ash. You think it wants him, my father said, voice echoing between the walls. But it doesn't. It wants balance. One son was buried. One son was spared. The house won't stop until it evens the debt. I didn't kill him, I shouted. It was an accident. The house doesn't believe in accidents. I gripped the hammer tighter, but it felt wrong in my hands. Heavy, pulsing, alive. The head of it glistened under the dim light, as though fresh blood was seeping from the cracks in the metal. A sudden knock came from behind me, 3 times. I turned slowly. The wall beside the bed was bulging, something pressing from the inside, distorting the plaster like flesh beneath thin skin. The outline of a hand formed first, then another, then a face. My brother's. Give it back, he whispered, voice muffled through the wall. I raised the hammer without thinking. My heart pounded so hard it felt like the house was echoing it back to me. Stay away from me. But then I saw it, my reflection in the cracked mirror across the room. I wasn't holding the hammer. He was. The reflection smiled, my brother's smile. He swung. I ducked. The hammer slammed into the wall, sending a burst of dust and blood into the air. I scrambled backward, coughing, blinded. When I opened my eyes again, the reflection was gone. But the hammer wasn't on the floor anymore. It was resting gently on my bed, and carved into the handle, beneath my father's initials, was a new set of letters. TG. Mine. From upstairs came a whisper. Faint, but clear, almost gentle. Your turn, Tommy. Episode 14, The Visitor in the Rain. The storm began just after midnight. Thunder rolled low across the valley, shaking the windows until their frames moaned. Rain lashed the house in sheets, drumming against the roof like frantic hands. But I didn't move. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the hammer. My hammer. My father's hammer. Our curse. It hadn't moved since I found it. Yet the wood still felt warm when I touched it, as if it remembered who it belonged to. I tried not to think about the initials carved into it. TG. They hadn't been there before. A knock came then, 3 soft taps against the front door. I froze. No one had been near this house for weeks. The nearest neighbor, Mrs. Glenn, was gone. taken by the same thing that haunted these walls. The knocking came again, a little harder this time. Through the sound of the storm, a voice called out, "Mr. Gray, I know what's in your walls." The words sliced through the thunder. I grabbed the hammer, more for comfort than protection, and made my way downstairs. The hallway lights flickered weakly as I reached for the door. On the porch stood a man in a long, soaked trench coat. His hair was white, plastered to his forehead. His face drawn and lined like a blueprint, crumpled and smoothed too many times. He didn't smile. He only said, "You shouldn't have opened it." "Who are you?" I asked, the words trembling out. He looked past me into the house. "I helped build it. Your father hired me. 1989. Said he needed an extra room, a space that wouldn't breathe." Lightning flashed behind him, and for a second, I saw something glisten under his coat. His hands were shaking, skin marked with thin white scars, burns maybe. "What do you mean wouldn't breathe?" I asked. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The smell of rain followed him, washing over the stale rot of the house. His eyes darted to the cracks in the ceiling, the stains on the floor. "Your father wasn't building a home," he said softly. "He was sealing a wound. He called it containment." I stared at him, my heart hammering. "You helped bury him?" The man's face twisted. "I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't. Your father said he wanted a memorial wall, something to keep the past close." When I realized what he'd done, I tried to stop him. But by then, the house had taken over. He turned toward the living room wall, the same one that had once held the skeleton. His eyes went wide, terrified, as if he could still see the shape buried inside. "It's awake again," he whispered. "You fed it too much grief, too much guilt. It's hungry now." A sound like a sigh drifted through the walls. The lights flickered. For a moment, the shadows bent, stretching long and thin, crawling up behind him. He turned to leave, panic seizing his face. "You need to burn it down," he said, gripping my arm. His fingers were cold as marble. "Every wall, every beam. If you don't, it'll finish what it started." "Finish what?" I demanded. He looked at me with pity. "You." The door behind him slammed shut on its own. The house groaned, the windows rattling violently. The old man gasped, clutching his chest. I tried to reach him, but the floorboards split beneath his feet. A hand, small, skeletal, gray, shot up from the crack and wrapped around his ankle. He screamed. The boards swallowed him whole, dragging him down into the house. The sound stopped as quickly as it started. Only the rain remained. I stood there, frozen, staring at the place where he'd stood. The hammer felt heavier in my hand now. The air was hot, electric, alive. From somewhere beneath the floor, his voice echoed one last time. Broken, distant, swallowed by the dark. "It's not your house anymore." And then came the knocking. Soft, slow, from under the floor. Episode 15, The House That Ate Its Children. The storm didn't end. It only changed direction, circling the house like it was afraid to leave. By morning, the light was wrong. It didn't fall through the windows anymore. It just hung there, gray and motionless, as if the air itself had forgotten how to move. I stood in the living room with the hammer in my hand, listening to the quiet. Except it wasn't quiet. The house was breathing again. Deep, low inhalations shuddered through the floorboards. Every few seconds, something beneath the wood would click, like the sound of bones realigning. The walls had grown darker overnight, damp and soft to the touch, the wallpaper pulsing gently, like skin with a heartbeat. I wanted to run, but the front door was gone. Where there should have been a door, there was now just plaster, fresh, wet, unpainted. I pressed my palm against it, and it felt warm. It throbbed beneath my fingers. The house had sealed itself. I ran to the kitchen. The windows there were gone too. Every exit had been replaced with smooth, living wall. The layout felt wrong. Rooms stretched longer than they should have, ceilings arched higher. The house wasn't the same shape anymore. It was rearranging itself. "Tommy," the walls whispered, voices overlapping. echoing from nowhere and everywhere. "It's time to come home." I stumbled backward, gripping the hammer tighter. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. The floor bulged, boards splintered upward. Something beneath began pushing through, something human-shaped. I slammed the hammer down, again and again, but the boards only cracked open wider, releasing a wave of hot, fetid air that smelled of graves and rain-soaked dirt. A face emerged, half-rotted, grinning. It was my brother, or what was left of him. His jaw hung slightly crooked, skin stretched thin over bone, eyes milky but alive. He spoke without moving his lips. "You left me in the dark, Tommy. You left me to rot while they kept you in the light." I swung the hammer again. It went straight through him. He dissolved like smoke, reforming behind me, whispering into my ear. "The house remembers which son it kept. It wants the other back." The walls shuddered. Portraits crashed to the floor. My mother's face, frozen in a smile, split down the middle as cracks spread through the plaster. I could hear crying now from upstairs. A child's voice. "Mommy says dinner's ready." The staircase stretched upward, taller than it had ever been, each step groaning like a heartbeat. I climbed anyway, because I had nowhere else to go. At the top, the hallway was different. Too long, too narrow. Doors lined both sides, hundreds of them. Some open, some just breathing quietly. From one of them, faint light spilled out, flickering, warm, familiar. I stepped inside. It was the dining room. The table was set, plates, cutlery, candles. My parents sat at either end, motionless. Their skin looked waxy, perfect, painted into place. Between them sat my brother, smiling, eyes glistening with something that might have been love or hunger. My chair was waiting, empty. "Sit," my mother's voice said, though her lips didn't move. "You're home now." I took a step back. The floor beneath me pulsed like a heartbeat. The walls began closing in, the ceiling sinking, the table stretching toward me. The house was eating us, slowly, carefully, the way a mother feeds her children. I ran. The hallway twisted behind me, doors slamming shut one by one. The hammer was hot in my hand now, vibrating, humming with the same rhythm as the walls. The last thing I saw before the lights died was a message carved into the plaster in a child's handwriting. "One son in, one son out." And as the floor split beneath me, swallowing the hammer whole, a voice whispered from the dark, "The house keeps what it loves." Episode 16, The Skeleton in My Skin. It started with my hands. When I woke, they didn't feel like mine anymore. The skin was cold, tight, almost translucent, like parchment stretched over something that wasn't supposed to move. My veins pulsed slowly, each beat echoing in the silence of the room. The hammer was gone, swallowed by the house during the night. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The air was heavier now, thick with dust and whispers. I could hear the house breathing through me. Each inhale scraped the inside of my chest, and when I exhaled, the walls sighed in rhythm. Somewhere deep in the floorboards, something answered my breath. A second heartbeat, out of sync, growing stronger. I stumbled to the mirror in the hall, one of the few that hadn't shattered yet. First, it showed nothing, just fog, swirling in shapes that almost looked human. Then, slowly, my reflection bled through. My face was pale, hollow, but what froze me wasn't the eyes. It was the outline beneath my skin. A skull. Not the faint shadow of bone that lives beneath everyone's flesh, but his. My brother's. I tore my shirt open. Lines were forming beneath the surface, faint ridges pressing upward like something buried just below. I clawed at my chest, half screaming, half praying, but the skin didn't break. It was hardening. "You don't need to fight," a voice murmured from inside the wall. "It's just making room." The walls pulsed. A sound like whispering bone filled the air, shifting, fusing, knitting together. I staggered backward, but the plaster behind me rippled and caught my shoulders. The surface was warm, sticky, clung to my skin, and then it began to pull. The more I fought, the deeper I sank. Inch by inch, the wall swallowing me, my ribs pressing into the plaster like wet clay. I screamed his name, my brother's, but the voice that came out wasn't mine. It was his. "You shouldn't have run, Tommy." I reached out, clawing at the floor, but my fingers snapped backward like dry twigs. Pain flashed white-hot through my arms, but there was no blood, just dust. Bones cracked, shifting inside me, realigning. The outline in the mirror changed again. My face stretched, reshaped itself, until the features weren't mine anymore. They were his, and when I opened my mouth, I heard both voices at once. Mine screaming, his laughing. The wall released me suddenly, and I fell to the floor, gasping. The house went quiet. The second heartbeat faded. For a moment, I thought it was over, but when I looked down, I saw something in my reflection from a shard of glass nearby. My left eye, clouded, bone-white, unmoving. The other still mine. "Halfway there," the whisper said, soft and patient. "You'll feel whole soon." I crawled toward the door, the one that wasn't there anymore, and found only plaster. I pressed my hand against it, pulsed back. Underneath, something tapped. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. The rhythm that started it all. And then, his voice came from deep inside my chest, vibrating my ribs like a drum. "You don't need 2 bodies, brother. Just one that remembers." I screamed until my throat tore, but the sound that came out wasn't mine. The house had found its way inside me, and I could feel it smiling beneath my skin. Episode 17, The Confession of the Walls. The house began to talk at sunrise. It didn't whisper this time, it spoke. Every beam, every nail, every crack in the plaster vibrated with a voice that wasn't a voice at all. It sounded like the moan of the earth itself, like grief given shape. I sat in the middle of what used to be the living room, now a breathing cavern of walls that pulsed like ribs. My hands trembled against the floorboards, but I didn't dare move. I knew it was listening. "You were both born here," the house said, its tone low and steady, as though telling me a bedtime story. 2 hearts, 1 promise. But promises rot, Tommy. They always rot. The boards creaked under me, shifting slightly. My brother's laughter rippled through the air like a cold breeze. "I didn't kill him," I said, my voice shaking. "I was a child. So was he." The ceiling cracked open, dust raining down like ash. Behind the dust, faint shapes began to move inside the walls. Shadows with faces I almost recognized. My mother, my father, the builder, Mrs. Glenn. All of them pressed into the structure, silent and swaying. "They fed me," the house continued. "Fear, guilt, lies. You humans build with more than wood, Tommy. You build with memory. Every secret you bury becomes another brick." I clutched my head. "Stop it. You're not real. You're not alive." The laughter stopped. The air went still. Then the voice came closer, vibrating through the floor until it rattled my teeth. "Not alive. Just remembered." The wall in front of me began to bulge outward, slow and wet. Letters carved themselves into the plaster, jagged and dripping. I forced myself to read them. "I saw you push him." I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "No, no, I tried to save him." The house groaned. From deep inside the walls came the faint echo of 2 children screaming. The sound of the past, preserved like an insect in amber. "You called it a game," the house murmured. "Hide and seek, but one of you hid too well. And your father built me to keep him hidden forever." I felt my breath catch. "That's not true," he said. "He said it was an accident. He said a lot of things," the voice replied, softer now. "He told the police the boy ran away. He told your mother it was her fault. And he told me." The walls shuddered violently. A crack opened behind me, revealing a faint red glow, pulsing like a wound. "He told me to keep you safe, because the dead one wouldn't forgive." The glow brightened, spilling light across the floor. Inside it, I saw movement, a figure pressed against the other side of the wall. My brother, pale and half-formed, smiling that same smile from the old photographs. "You made me remember," he said. "Now the house remembers too." The walls began to close in, contracting like lungs exhaling. The floor tilted beneath me, pushing me toward the red glow. "You wanted the truth," the house whispered. "Here it is. I don't keep secrets, Tommy. I become them." I dug my nails into the boards, but they bent like flesh beneath my hands. The light swallowed everything, walls, floor, air, until all I could see was my brother's face, hovering inches from mine. He leaned closer, his voice a single breath against my ear. "You didn't bury me, Tommy. You built me." The light went out, and for the first time since I came back home, the house fell completely silent. Episode 18, The Last Knock. For the first time since I came back, the house was quiet. No whispers, no breathing, no movement inside the walls. But silence, I've learned, doesn't mean peace. It means waiting. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom, staring at the place where the plaster had cracked open and bled. It had sealed itself again during the night, perfect, smooth, untouched, almost as if it was proud of what it had done. Then came the first sound. Knock. Soft, measured, too deliberate to be chance. I turned slowly toward the wall. Knock. Knock. Each one louder than the last, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The rhythm was familiar, but slower this time, heavier, like a heart beating its final few times. My hands were trembling. I pressed my palm against the wall. Warm, pulsing, alive. "Tommy." The voice was faint, muffled behind the plaster. "It's almost time," I whispered back. "Time for what?" "For one of us to stay." A chill crawled up my spine. I stepped back, staring at the wall as hairline cracks began to spread outward from where my hand had touched it. From behind those cracks came a faint red light, like something breathing fire on the other side. And then I heard it, the sound that had haunted my childhood. A hammer. Thud, thud, thud. Slow, steady, relentless. The light grew brighter. The cracks widened. And then, through the plaster, a shape began to form. A door. Not one that had ever existed before, its outline uneven, as though carved by something blind. The voice came again, softer now, coaxing. "You built this, Tommy. Every secret, every lie, every night you pretended not to hear me. You made the doorway. You only have to open it." My breath shook. "What happens if I do?" The voice almost smiled. Then I stopped knocking. I don't remember deciding to move, but I did. I reached out. My fingers brushed the wall, and the plaster rippled like water. The handle was already there, made of bone, smooth and cold. I turned it. The door opened onto darkness, and from that darkness my brother stepped through. He looked complete, flesh restored, eyes gleaming with something too human to be human. But it was his smile that stopped my breath. Warm, gentle, the way it used to be before everything went wrong. "It's my turn now," he said. "You can rest." He reached for me. His fingers brushed my arm, cold as stone, yet alive. The touch spread through me like frost, locking my muscles, dragging the warmth from my blood. I fell to my knees. The house shuddered, walls breathing faster, heartbeat accelerating all around us. "You took my life," he whispered, "so I'll take yours. One of us was always supposed to stay behind." I gasped. "Then take me. Just stop the house." He smiled again, sad this time. "The house isn't me anymore, Tommy. It's us." The light burst from the cracks, blinding, searing. The sound of hammers filled the air, hundreds of them, beating in rhythm. The walls pulsed, alive and screaming, until I couldn't tell if the noise came from inside or outside my skull. Then, all at once, silence. When I opened my eyes, the door was gone. The walls smooth again. The floor beneath me cold, still. But I wasn't alone. A single, gentle knock came from inside my chest. "Knock, knock, knock," and my brother's voice whispered through my ribs, calm, patient, final. "You can rest now. I'll keep the house alive." The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was possession. Episode 19, The Collapse. They said the storm broke around 3 a.m. The neighbors, Those few who still lived close enough to remember the gray house swore they heard a sound that didn't belong to thunder, a deep, hollow groan that rolled across the valley like the earth itself was splitting apart. By sunrise, the house was gone. Not burned, not demolished, gone. What stood in its place was a blackened pit, still steaming, surrounded by fragments of wood and plaster warped into impossible shapes. The air reeked of rust and rain and something sour, like old blood. The fire chief said it was structural collapse from the storm. Gas leak, maybe. But no one could explain why the soil beneath the foundation had hardened to stone, or why the ash on the ground had formed the faint outline of two sets of footprints, one small, one large, leading nowhere. When the rescue crew dug through the wreckage, they found a body near what used to be the living room. It wasn't burned. It wasn't even broken, just wrong. The bones were fused in places no human skeleton should fuse. The skin was pale, cold, smooth as wax, stretched tight over the shape beneath. Its mouth hung open, frozen mid-scream, though no sound had ever escaped. At first, they thought it was Thomas Gray. The coroner made the note himself. Male, late 30s, cause of death undetermined. But when they tried to fingerprint the remains, the ridges didn't match any record in the database. And when they checked the dental records, those didn't match either. Still, the face looked like Thomas. Mostly. The eyes, though one was his color. The other was cloudy, white, lifeless, as if something inside it had turned to stone. The report never reached the press. The local police sealed the file within days. Chief Walker's successor called it a closed matter, citing structural failure and the presence of hazardous gases. But those who were there, the cleanup crew, the medical examiner, the man who took the photos, told a different story in whispers. They said the body had been clutching something, a hammer, and that the initials carved into the handle were clear, perfect, and fresh. TG. The coroner claimed he saw movement during the autopsy. A twitch beneath the ribs, a faint sound like knocking from within the chest cavity. He quit the next day and left town without explanation. That night, the town lost power for 7 minutes. When the lights came back on, the evidence room was empty. The body, the hammer, the photographs, gone. The only thing left on the table was a single scrap of paper, stained dark by water and dust. On it, written in a child's uneven handwriting, "The house keeps what it loves." Since then, no one has built on that land. The ground refuses to hold a foundation. Every year, someone leaves flowers at the edge of the pit. Lilies, always lilies. No one knows who. But sometimes, when the rain hits just right, the echo returns. A dull, rhythmic knocking beneath the earth. 3 times. Always 3. Episode 20, Epilogue, The New Family. 17 years after the collapse, they built again. The developers called it the Oaks at Millhaven, a quiet, modern cul-de-sac where the gray house once stood. They said the land had finally settled. They said the ground was safe now. But the ground remembers. The new family moved in just before winter. The father, a contractor from out of state. The mother, a schoolteacher with a soft voice and tired eyes. And their son, Nathan, 6 years old, curious, always listening. The house was beautiful. Bright white walls, smooth oak floors, no cracks, no stains, no whispers. The kind of place that made you forget anything bad had ever happened there. For a while, everything was quiet, until the 3rd night. Nathan's mother found him sitting on the floor in the hallway, tapping the wall with his knuckles. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. She smiled sleepily. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" He looked up at her with wide eyes. "He knocks first," he said simply. She froze. "Who?" "The man in the wall. Children say strange things," she told herself. "Imaginary friends. Dreams that feel too real." She laughed, kissed his forehead, and tucked him back into bed. But later that night, when she passed the hallway again, she heard it. 3 slow knocks, from inside the wall. The sound was soft but deliberate, the rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Her husband said it was the pipes, settling from the new construction. He banged on the plaster with a flashlight, checked for leaks. Nothing. The sound never happened when he was around. But every night, at the same time, Nathan would wake up and whisper to the wall, "I can hear you too." A week later, the mother found drawings taped to his bedroom door. Stick figures. 2 boys. One tall, one small. Both standing inside a house drawn with thick black crayon. In the corner of the page, in careful letters, he'd written, "Tommy and me." The father blamed stories from television, too many ghost shows. He told Nathan to stop. But the boy just stared at him, puzzled, as though he couldn't understand why his father couldn't hear what was so obvious. That night, the power went out. When the lights returned, every picture frame in the house hung crooked. Every wall bore faint impressions, small, rounded marks in the plaster, like fingerprints pressing from the other side. And in Nathan's room, on the window pane, written in the fog, "The house keeps what it loves." The next morning, the family packed to leave. But the front door wouldn't open. The handle turned, the hinges creaked, but the frame had fused to the wall. The father struck it again and again until his hands bled, but the wood only groaned in reply. From upstairs came Nathan's voice, calm, happy. "It's okay, Mommy. He says I can stay." When they found his room, the bed was empty, sheets perfectly made. Only his small handprint remained on the wall above the headboard, pressed deep into the plaster. And if you stand in that hallway now, on quiet nights when the rain is heavy and the world holds its breath, you can still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. A pause. Then a child's voice, soft and clear, from somewhere deep inside the walls. He's not alone anymore.
Epilogue. What the house remembered. They never found Nathan. The police searched for weeks. Drones, dogs, volunteers, the entire neighborhood combed through the woods and the fields surrounding the property. Not a trace, not a footprint, not a single thread of clothing. Only the sound. Every night, as the sun sank behind Millhaven, the new tenants of the nearby homes would pause mid-sentence, mid-breath, when they heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Always 3. Always from the same house. The family that owned it moved away before spring. The house was listed for sale again, stripped clean, staged with furniture that never belonged to anyone. Agents said it showed beautifully in the daylight, bright, open, newly renovated. But when dusk came, the air inside changed. Buyers complained of dizziness, of cold patches in the hallway. One woman fainted near the staircase and woke whispering, "He's behind the wall." The listing agent quit after that. Months later, a demolition order was filed. The county planned to level the property once and for all, turn the land into an empty lot. But when the workers arrived, the foreman found something strange. The blueprints no longer matched the structure. There were new rooms, new hallways, walls where none had been before. At the center of the house stood a single door, sealed shut with cement, no hinges, no handle. Someone had carved words into it, deep and uneven, as if scratched by bone. One sun in, one sun out. The foreman left before sunset. No one returned. And so the house still stands, its windows blank and waiting. Sometimes, when the wind runs through the valley, you can hear the echo of children laughing, soft, distant, and wrong. Locals say the sound comes from beneath the floors, from a place that never stops remembering. They say if you knock 3 times, the house will knock back. And if you listen closely enough, you'll hear 2 voices whisper from inside the walls, speaking in perfect unison. "We're home.